Welcome to the Art of Lifting podcast. Today I am joined by Matt Gary. Now, I don't think you need much of an introduction for anyone listening to this, but just in case, did you want to just introduce yourself a little bit?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that. I don't think I'm particularly anything special, but my name is Matt. I'm a 30-year veteran of the sport. As a competitor, a referee, I've probably served on every imaginable committee that you possibly can have within a powerlifting federation, and most notably, I've cut my teeth as a coach, both a national team coach as well as just an individual game day coach, and that's pretty much where my passion lies.
Perfect. So, like I said before, most people will know who you are, I'm sure, that are listening to this. But I listen to pretty much every single powerlifting podcast there is. And I don't actually think I know how you found powerlifting or what your background was before powerlifting. So I thought maybe we could just start with a little bit of getting to know that side of things with you.
Of course. Yeah. It's funny. I first discovered, and this is going to date me, I first discovered the sport of powerlifting in 1982. So that was a very long time ago. It was introduced to me by my junior varsity football, that's American football coach. And so he was a former powerlifter, and he kind of brought it to our high school and introduced it to us. And of course, as young lads and young boys, we're kind of like, who doesn't want to be big and strong? This seems cool. Let me give this a shot. And of course, knowing nothing about strength training, exercise, a barbell, you name it, at the tender age of 10 years old, I go into the gym with my coach, the football coach, and he's teaching us how to squat. And to make a really long story short, the next 2 days were spent in writhing agony because my leg muscles were so sore. And he didn't warn us that, hey, you're actually tearing muscle fiber and you're breaking down your body a little bit. And there's a process of building and repairing and so on and so forth. And so when he didn't tell us that, I was really alarmed, like I'd actually done something wrong. Like, I'm like, this can't be normal. And, really just pitched it to the side and vowed to never do this ever again. I said, this is scary. I don't like this. This doesn't make me feel good. And so fast forward to going into college and playing American football. Just growing up, the two sports that I probably played were your football, which is soccer for us, and American football. And just, being pretty good at American football and playing that through boys club and then grade school and high school. I actually played in college. I played a year of semi-professional as well. And so just, strength is an asset. It's never a liability. And certainly it's an asset in those kinds of sports. And so it kind of got reintroduced to me by my strength and conditioning coach in college. And I kind of got turned back onto it. And so once I left college, that's when I really started to pay attention to the sport. And back then it was just reading everything through magazines, because this is, pre-internet. And I know that sounds funny too, but that was the reality back then. And so as an athlete, I didn't really get involved in powerlifting until 1995. And that was when I first competed. So it was exposed to me in 82. I kind of pitched it to the side and then got reacquainted with it in 1995 as a competitor.
Yeah. So I'm assuming back in those days it was all equipped as well, or did you compete when you finally started competing as well?
Yeah. So it was. Matter of fact, it was all equipped. It wasn't. So how do I explain it? It wasn't though that you couldn't compete classic or what we know as raw. You could. It was just that everybody else was wearing equipment. Everybody else was using knee wraps and squat suits and bench shirts, and so if you chose to compete classic, you were essentially giving everybody else just this head start toward the finish line, so to speak. And so you were at such a supreme disadvantage. So that's really all we knew was just using the equipment. So I did start out, competing equipped and using the equipment. And then occasionally, I think what we would do back then was we would use raw training, or without the equipment, we would have periods of training blocks where we're training raw. And then we would usually kind of segue that would become a transition into adding the gear. So you might have a block where you're just using your belt. And this was kind of like pre-knee sleeves. Like we didn't even use knee sleeves back then. It was just you were squatting with a belt. And so you'd squat with a belt and you'd get kind of as strong as you possibly could with the belt and kind of peak your training. And you might run that into a meet and just kind of test your raw strength. And then right after the meet, you'd be like, okay, cool. My next block, I'm adding the knee wraps. And I'm going to run the knee wrap. You run as far as I can go. You know, it might be 4, 5, 6 weeks with the wraps. And then you're maybe adding the suit bottoms. And it was kind of a transition like that. Yeah. So it was competing equipped with an occasional, hey, let me test my raw strength at a meet and just really not care where I place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just looked at your open powerlifting. I'm assuming this is the right Matt Gary, because your first competition was 97.
Well, no, yeah. So let me just say this: the open powerlifting is very incomplete. That's probably 1/3 of what I have done, and it's interesting because I've looked back. And I'm not trying to like defend myself. I'm just keeping it real. Some of the data that's in there is incorrect and so forth. But anyway. My very first competition was the 95, but I've probably done about 3 times as much as is actually printed on that page. So,
yeah, which is obviously fair enough. I think if people don't know, open powerlifting is all volunteer run as well, isn't it? And
totally.
Yeah, and also just finding data from back then is next to impossible.
It is. It's next to impossible to find accurate meet results. So yes, God bless Joe Whiteley and Pete Spence and the rest of the crew that do that. I know that's a labor of love for them. And as a powerlifting community, we're kind of indebted to them. I mean, it's like how many other sports have this kind of database with that amount of information at our fingertips? So no, I'm not complaining at all. I'm just saying in terms of representing my career, it's pretty, incomplete.
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
Something I actually didn't realize, you did a meet back in 2022? So you actually competed somewhat recently.
I did. I basically, so what happened was, this was right in between the transition here between, my USAPL and Powerlifting America and kind of getting my footing and so forth. And at that particular time in 2022, I was still connected to USA Powerlifting. And so my allegiance at the time kind of, you could say it lied there. And so, USA Powerlifting was prominent in the state of Montana, which is where I live. And the issue is in Montana is there just weren't that many referees. So anytime there's a meet in Montana, I kind of felt obligated, Susie and I, to throw our hand into the pile and volunteer. And so I felt really bad. So I competed and I did one meet in the USPA, kind of off the grid, so to speak, just because it's like, hey, let me do a meet where there is no other APL presence and so forth, and nobody's going to know me and be bothering me for this, that, and the other thing, or for coaching. I can just kind of go and do my thing. And so, I hadn't competed in a while. I went in and competed completely raw, like no belt, just a singlet, just to kind of have some fun. And it was a good experience. So no complaints.
So do you still train powerlifting?
I do. Oh, certainly. Yeah. Yep. I train along with my wife, Susie, and still train 4 times a week. And, I do probably want to compete again, but I get so much more value out of coaching. That's where my heart lies. Yeah.
So my actual next question was going to be about your coaching. So am I right in thinking you don't do so much of the programming side now and you're mostly just a game day coach? I say mostly a game day coach now.
That is 100% accurate. There's one athlete that I still write training for, and that's Ray Williams. And he is literally the only athlete that I still write training for. Otherwise it's exclusively just game day coaching, the national team coaching. I do a lot of consulting, a lot of mentorship and things of that nature. But I'm just not doing the programming anymore. For me, it just became so time consuming, and I'm such a perfectionist that it just, it got to the point where it just was really weighing on me so heavily, quite frankly, that it was just taking away from my quality of life. So plus, quite frankly, I am thrilled to have a lot of people within kind of my network to say, hey, these people are really good at programming. They enjoy doing it and they're better than I am. So let me, introduce you to my friends, Marcellus Williams or Mike Touchier or Kelly Mann or Jason Tremblay or what have you, and kind of, refer out that way as well.
Yeah, I didn't actually prep you for this, but I was going to ask you as you were talking there about the level of coaching compared, well, even just over the last 10 years or so, how much it's changed. But like since you got into the sport versus now, I mean, even just as a career, I'm assuming powerlifting coaching as a career probably wasn't really a thing back in the day.
Yeah, you're right. It really wasn't. I think when I was coming up, you would go to competitions and it was almost as if you were just helping your training partners. That was the game day coaching outside of the national teams, of course. But if you kind of rock up to these local competitions or regional competitions or state championships, what have you, anything short of nationals, you were just really kind of going to support your training partners. So it was almost expected, like, hey, if you're not competing at this meet, you need to come help because I'm going to need help getting into my kit. I'm going to need help with my equipment, et cetera. And then when I was competing, likewise, my training partners would come and support me. And so that was kind of what it was. And there was there was a lot less, certainly at the local level and so forth, a lot less true game day coaching with the strategy and so forth. It was just kind of your friends coming, helping you load weights, helping you into your kit. And then, you're kind of picking your own attempts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting as well now how like you've probably been a big pioneer with this of it's not common for people to coach and not do the programming side as part of their career. But the fact that you are now in a position where your job is essentially, like you say, consultations and stuff as well, but the game day coaching is your primary job there. I think that's so interesting, and it just speaks volumes for how much the sport has grown.
It has, and I'm very, very blessed to be able to do that. And I think, I think at times, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, I think each of us at points in time can get pigeonholed into, oh, that's the RPE guy, or that's the daily undulating periodization lady who, espouses that type of training. And Matt, well, he's the game day guy. And it's, that's fine. I have no complaints, but clearly a lot of us possess varying skill sets. But just to your point, I'm very blessed and very fortunate to be at a point in my career where I can focus on the thing that I'm most passionate about. And of course, as you may be aware, two years ago, I wrote a book and published my game day coaching manual, which was obviously huge, not only just for myself to put something back into the community, but I think also to help lift the community up, because there was really, matter of factly, like no written text on the subject of game day coaching. And so I think that has helped also to kind of elevate my name a little bit just within the community in terms of, game day coaching, national team coaching, et cetera.
Yeah, definitely. I think it has to be said, it's quite clear you also know how to program, seeing as you program for Ray Williams of all people.
Yeah, right. Of course, it's not as though you lose that skill or that skill kind of goes away or vanishes. I still possess that skill. It's just one that, I don't intentionally choose to do that for anybody outside of him. Yeah.
When did you actually start coaching within your powerlifting career? Did you start coaching relatively early on, or is that more of a recent thing?
Well, so if you're referring to just like programming and stuff, I think that, I went to school and I got a degree in kinesiology, exercise physiology. And so I think as many of us, when we start competing and getting involved in the sport, we'll start writing training for friends and for colleagues and so forth. And I think I was doing that, and Susie and I opened a facility in Maryland, SSPT, in 2009, and I was doing a lot of programming back then and also just before then. So I guess in terms of actually programming, I've been writing training for quite a long time, probably since the late 90s, early 2000s. But in terms of like formal game day coaching, specifically at the national team level, that wasn't until I got my first opportunity in 2003. So in 2003, that was my wife, my now wife, but then girlfriend, Susie, was competing at the World Championships, the Equipped World Championships in Chicago. And she'd asked me if we were training partners, and she'd asked if I'd like to come along. And I said, well, of course, I would love to come along. I've never been to a World Championships. And she said, well, I want you to come coach me. And I was like, just flabbergasted. I'm like, coach you? Like, okay, how's that work? Anyway. And so I was kind of baptized by fire, so to speak. I went there. Obviously, there was a national team coach. which of course I deferred to. And I just kind of shut up and kept my mouth shut and just chalked backs and pulled up straps and rolled knee wraps and wrapped knees and just kind of threw my hand in the pile in terms of just giving sweat equity and labor as much as I could. And so once I did that, Larry Maley, who was the president of USA Powerlifting, he still is to this day. He matter of factly became my mentor, because any time that my wife Susie made a national team, I then got invited back on as an assistant, and so that's how I got my start with coaching at the national team level. Yeah.
Am I right in thinking, it's going to make me sound like I don't know, am I right in thinking Susie's competed at the national, like internationally, quite a lot, hasn't she? She's quite like a well-known lifter.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think, I mean, I'll toot her horn. I want to say she's won 33 or 34 national championships, and she's competed at probably, oh gosh, I want to say she may have competed at 25 world championships in total between masters and open, classic, and equipped. It's quite extraordinary. So she is a legend in our sport, obviously on the American side, but globally as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've definitely heard this before, but I think I was, because I did Commonwealth back in October, and obviously Masters Worlds was at the same time, and I think I was actually there when she was competing. So yeah, I wanted to definitely bring that up. Moving on more to present day. So you are the GB head coach, Team GB head coach now.
Yep.
And you've just been to your first international with Team GB.
Yep.
Before we talk through Euros, I was going to ask you how you found your first ever British Nationals. I'm assuming that was the first one you'd been to.
Yeah, that was the first one. So yeah, in Wolverhampton, and I quite liked it. I really enjoyed it. It's funny, when I quote unquote got the job and I was announced, it was already, I mean, put it this way, throughout the interview process, I knew immediately, I'd already said to myself, it is incumbent upon me that if I get this job, I need to attend the nationals. I have to, number one, watch the lifters. I have, this is how we're selecting our national team. And I have to meet people and shake hands and get to know the people that I don't already know. I knew quite a few of them from coaching against them at internationals, and kind of had fringe relationships via social media, but I knew that I needed to come. And so when I came, it was fantastic. I liked it a lot. I thought it was a great experience. I really liked the overall vibe. I thought the production quality was high. Everything seemed to be pretty organized and flowed well. And I know that was also, if I'm not mistaken, like your largest nationals to date, right?
Yeah, by far.
By far. So look, the warm-up room got a little bit tight at times. But I think that's not necessarily a complaint. I think we can all say, hey, we've been in warm-up rooms where there's a lot of competitors and they get tight. It's like, look, you do the very best that you can with the space that you have. So that would be my only very minor complaint, was just the warm-up room got kind of dicey at times. But yeah, I thought the stadium seating was a huge win. That was great. We just had our Powerlifting American Nationals and they didn't have stadium seating. So whenever you can employ that, that's a huge win. The community and the people were wonderful. They embraced Susie and I and welcomed us with open arms. And I got the opportunity to coach there as well as referee. So it was really cool. I liked it. So I would give it high marks.
Yeah, I think so. I competed at that one. I also competed at the one the year before, which was held in a gym. And I actually enjoyed the one the year before. Yes, it being in a gym obviously made it a little bit more cramped and less of like a spectacle, I would say. But it was like really well ran and it just went really well. And so comparing that directly to the one that they held in the hangar at Wolverhampton, the level of entries, so I'm in the 84s, and I'm pretty sure in 2023, there was maybe 7 of us, where I'm pretty sure this time there was about 20 84s, which for GB is a crazy difference. But no, the organization and the way it ran, like as an athlete, I was incredibly happy. Like I didn't really have any complaints. I think, like you said, the warm-up room was a bit cramped, but I was also in there with the 120 men, so it was going to feel more cramped. I think that just depended on the groups. But they actually held the junior championships there literally just a couple of weeks ago, and I was there for one of the days, and they moved it around. So where the tiered seating was, they actually had the warm-up room on that half of the room, and it was so much more spacious. And then they had 2 platforms next to each other just as you come in the venue. It wasn't tiered seating. It's probably the only negative, but there was a lot more room for standing and stuff. So I think making use of the space, they definitely took that feedback on board, which I think is really good. But yeah, it was a very good first GB Nationals to come to, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, and I thought White Lights Media did a fantastic job, and it was just, it was awesome to me. Like you said, the athlete experience is the one that matters the most, right? Because that's who you're featuring, and so if you sort it out and cater to and take care of and look after your athletes, then I think you've done a pretty good job.
Yeah. So I have a question in comparison to Powerlifting American Nationals. Obviously, you said like the Nationals just gone, they didn't have kids sitting at Powerlifting America. So that's one thing where maybe GB was one up on. But in terms of production quality, so Powerlifting American Nationals is a spectacle. Like just from a viewer perspective, I think like I watched the live stream like the last 2 years. It's been incredible to watch. They've done it really well. I wondered from one coaching, but also just being that perspective, how would you say it compared to the way GB Nationals was back in November?
Certainly, I think I'd have to look at the actual list in terms of the rosters. I'm not sure which nationals like technically had more lifters. The venue that Powerlifting American Nationals was at this time was just, it was enormous. It was in a convention center, and we shared the venue with USA Weightlifting. So weightlifting was going on other platforms, but kind of, sectioned off from us. So we had 3 platforms running simultaneously, but then as you saw, the primetime sessions obviously condensed down to 1. So in terms of physical space and layout, it was, matter of fact, just larger and grander scale. But in terms of the actual number of lifters, I'm not certain that we were that much larger than British championships. The British, I don't know, I'd have to look at the numbers. You all may have been just as large. But anyway, in terms of the organization and the production and all that sort of thing, honestly, it felt pretty similar. And I thought the British championships were fantastic. Our warm-up room was enormous, so it was cavernous, which was great. You know what I mean? And then obviously during the primetime sessions where you have a lot fewer competitors anyway, it's kind of nice and everybody back there kind of knows what they're doing, and you're not running into somebody who may only be there at their first nationals. But yeah, and again, I was coaching, so I really can only comment from that kind of experience. I have gone back and watched some of the live stream. But yeah, I thought some of the live stream for the British was good too, and I actually helped Amelia with some of the live stream sessions when I was at the British. So, I think they were comparable in that way. And, there might be 1 or 2 things that I liked about each championships that, liked a little bit more than the other. But yeah, I think, from everybody that I spoke to in GB, they said that was like the biggest production that you all had ever done and that things are really looking up. So, that's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. GB is on a very good trajectory at the moment, and that Nationals was kind of the first big event to kind of show how things were going. And yeah, they did really, really well. And now that our qualifying has changed for Nationals in the future, I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens this year. I'm assuming the procedure for that, where it's the top 14 in each weight class now.
Yep, I do. Yep, I'm aware. And so, we shall see where this job takes me. I'll just be transparent. The agreement in terms of my term was for the 2025 competitive season. And so I'll be coaching obviously at the World Championships in Germany, and then I'll be coaching at the World Games. And then I think the agreement was we were all going to kind of sit down and evaluate, hey, where are we? And so on and so forth. Obviously, presumably the torch is going to be passed to Peach, Alex Pearson Jones. It's not a matter of if, it's more a matter of when. And so, also the question comes, will he feel comfortable and want, that role at that time? And I think it's all of us just sitting down and being mature about things and seeing where we are. And if I'm invited back, then I have a decision to make if I'm going to come back. And if not, hey, it's handshakes and happy trails and it's all good. So we'll see. But yes, I'm well aware that this year's British will be a smaller scale in terms of the number of lifters and so forth. And so also, obviously, I've already begun discussing with Peach, and we'll have to give our selection criteria another look and reevaluate that. And I'm sure we need to adjust some of that. And, so that's kind of par for the course, I think.
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
Just quickly, while we're somewhat on the topic of Powerlifting American Nationals, I was just going to ask you, because I always forget, they don't have a qualifying total procedure that you just have to have done a meet within the federation. What are your thoughts on that? I find it so bizarre.
Yeah, it's so this is, yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think that you should have to have a legitimate qualifying total to get into a meet. You should not be able to just rock up to a competition and do the bar and collars, 25 kilos across, and that's your total, to get into the meet. I do think that you should need a qualifying total. My understanding is that because the membership and the numbers are low and they're matter-of-factly just trying to grow the federation, that's why they're doing that. So I do think they're going to reach a point. I don't know when it will be. Maybe the next year, 2-3 years, where it's like, okay, now we can no longer do that. We want to make this a more exclusive club, a more exclusive competition, And I guess it depends on who you talk to. There are some people who like this is a gigantic nationals. Let's be all inclusive. Let's make it this extravaganza of strength. And then there's other people who say, no, matter of factly, we're trying to pick our national teams, and it should really be a little bit more meaningful to qualify for and compete at a nationals. And so it just depends on what the vision is of obviously leadership and then structuring your format accordingly.
Yeah, of course, to be fair, when we've always had, as long as I've been in the sport, we've had qualifying totals with GB nationals. But I know when they announced the news for the top 14 in each weight class, I like the news, but I also know that I'm going to be in the top 14 in my weight class. So that's a bit of a biased viewpoint. But sure. I've always been in the mindset of, nationals is a prestigious event. It should be hard to get into. And then the competitions below that will hopefully then be more competitive and more fun and a higher level, which is kind of the way I'm looking at it. But you do also get that other perspective of, well, I'm never going to get to nationals now. What am I going to do? What's the point of me being in the sport? And that more I don't want to say negative mindset around it, but that way of thinking for people that maybe don't see themselves reaching the top 14, which obviously in some weight classes like the 93 men or the 83 men is always going to be a lot harder. But yeah, you get that band camp kind of across the board. And I guess with the Powerlifting America side, it's just a bigger scale of currently anyone can do nationals. When they bring those totals in, where is that cut-off point going to be? I guess as well, because America is so big, even just being able to afford to go to nationals, a lot of lifters probably wouldn't choose to anyway, which is probably why the numbers, considering there is no qualifying procedure, the numbers aren't crazy high.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, as you said, the United States is just an enormous country. And so that clearly becomes a factor. And I think also if you're just this up and coming lifter and you kind of look at the landscape and you realize I have absolutely no shot of coming in even the top 15 to 20, kind of why bother? I need to just matter of factly get stronger, continue to, expand and grow as a competitor, as a powerlifter. And to your point, I think we need to, as federations, create these off ramps or these on ramps, depending upon how you look at it, to groom along these grassroots lifters. You know what I mean? Whether it be state, local, states, regionals, et cetera, to then groom them and say, okay, there's a pathway of kind of ascending up the ladder here. I mean, obviously, when you have somebody who has prodigious talent and they can come in and immediately qualify and go to nationals, that's different. But for most people, there needs to be, I think people like to know that, hey, I've got a logical pathway and process of kind of a stepping stone and a ladder to get to where I want to go. And it should mean something to compete at the nationals, right? I mean, it should carry a level of prestige where it is an exclusive club because it is a national championships, and we are trying to determine our national champions to qualify for the national team to go to Worlds. Yeah,
definitely. No, I do agree on that. I also think actually having individual state championships as the level below could be really interesting. I guess it depends on, especially with the split between obviously USAPL, Powerlifting America, certain states probably aren't going to have enough of an interest in Powerlifting America to do that. But long-term idea, that'd be really cool, because even if you can't make it to nationals, you could be the state champion, which would be very cool.
Exactly. Yeah. And so clearly, I mean, depending upon the states, there's 50 states in the United States, and depending upon which one you're in, there may not be much of a Powerlifting America presence. And so you certainly can't begrudge other lifters who are just getting their foot in the door to choose other avenues, depending upon what's the, prevalent in their state. But to your point, yeah, it is kind of cool when you can become a state champion. Even some states in the past, like North Carolina and South Carolina, have had these, what they call the battle on the border, where it's rivaling states and so forth. And we actually in the United States have quite a few really strong lifters in the Carolinas. And so it's really kind of neat to have these competitions where they can battle against each other.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important just for the continued growth. And like you say, for the lifters that are maybe not going to be at that national competitive top 3, top 5 at national level, but you don't have to be at that level to still get something out of the sport. And then having little competitions like that would be so much, and also spectator wise as well. You don't have to travel too far to go watch these high level people competing. I really like that idea.
Yep, exactly.
So we will travel back to present time.
Yep.
I wanted to ask you how you have found being the head coach for GB so far. So you've had Euros now. I'm assuming that was the first time you've handled at Euros as well?
It was, yes. That was the first time at a European Championships. That was like a bucket list coaching item for me, to be quite honest with you, because, I mean, not to toot my own horn or sound standoffish, but I've coached at a lot of different world championships. I think this year in Germany will be my 24th World Championships that I've actually coached at. And so, and I've coached at North Americans, I've coached at Commonwealths in New Zealand. And so I've been around and globally, but Euros, at least to me, is like a really, really big deal. And so in my mind's eye, it is the most prestigious of the regional championships. I've often referred to it as almost like a World Championships light, or a World Championships B, because so many of the high quality nations and lifters are represented. So for me, it was just an over the moon experience to be able to coach at Euros, number one. Number two, lead a national team to Euros. I mean, that's fantastic. So it was awesome. So thankful for it.
Do you have any particular highlights from the competition? I know myself, I actually spoke to him briefly about it, Paul in the 120 plus, just watching him dancing. I think it was his second bench. He was just dancing. They got it on the live stream. And then his third, he came out and he looked so serious. I was like, how can you have that contrast? But I know that, I mean, generally, like a lot of the people lifting and stuff, like I've spoken to them before, and I was just really happy to watch them compete. Like Quinn in the 84 plus, like I get on with her really well. It was lovely to see her in the GB singlet.
Yes.
But yeah, watching Paul his first time in for Team GB as well, like he's still fairly new, and just seeing how much fun he had was definitely a highlight for me, just from a little British lifter viewing perspective. But yeah, obviously you were there, you handled in most of the sessions, I'm assuming. How did you find it? What were the highlights for you?
Yeah, first of all, I found it to be wonderful. Like I said, bucket list experience for me. And so overall, just high marks and just thrilled to be a part of it. In terms of some of the individual highlights for me, I mean, yes, I got the opportunity to work with Paul at the British because Peach is his coach. And so Peach had a Quinn during that session at the British. And so he kind of asked me, he's like, hey, will you coach Paul? And we'll kind of like tag team. And I was like, hey, first of all, this would be great, because we both get the opportunity to, number one, work together, and then I get to work with one of your athletes. And yeah, so I had my first exposure with Paul at the British, and he's just this, happy-go-lucky. I mean, everything you saw on the live stream, like, he's not faking it. That's not an act. And so his personality is so positive and so upbeat and joyful. And so that was, and then likewise on the female side, like almost a carbon copy is Melina Irawao. Just unbelievable. I absolutely adore her. Just has a zest and a joy for life, and one of the most positive and delightful human beings I think I have ever been around. And so absolutely fell in love with working with her. That was awesome. I mean, it was really cool to work with some legendary lifters too, like Tasman Campbell, you know what I mean? And then you've got some up-and-comers or some people who, it's cool that Temi was competing in the 76s. I think that was only her second time as a 76, because she had been in 84, and she came down to 76 and just like knocked it out of the park. And so like my wife, Susie, was her primary coach on the day and looked after her. And that was really cool because Temi executed like a pro, and it was nice to have Bettina Hamlin on the squad as well. And then also, I mean, working firsthand with Nanzo and just the performance that he put on, I mean, clearly, you know what I mean? I was so excited for him to obviously perform the way that he did. And then to hit that kind of milestone achievement right in the deadlift, I almost feel like it came as a bit of a relief. And maybe even more so for me than for him. Like I was so elated for him to be able to just check that box, because it's like, the entire world and powerlifting community knew that he had the strength and that he was capable of doing it. It was just something that he kind of needed to do to almost get like this monkey off your back to say, okay, cool. Now I've done that. We're sorted. And now I can kind of move on, because the entire world, it felt like, was kind of clamoring for this number. And so that was cool. And just working with Monzo was wonderful as well. He's so coachable and such a delight to be around. But yeah, honestly, the entire team was brilliant. They were all wonderful. The squad's experience that I had was good leading into it, and everybody was really attentive. And so Christian and Doken, you name it. I mean, it was really just an awesome experience. And so thrilled to be a part of it. I realized you asked me just how am I finding it. One of the things that I wanted to mention, if you go to like an IPF World Championships and you look at the results and you scroll down to the bottom, past all the individual results, and look at how many countries are represented. The IPF has over 125, I think it is 130 member federations. But to an open world championships, depending upon the year, the last couple of years, there's been about 50 countries or 50 teams. So when you think about that, there's a very finite number of these positions available, right? It's not like there's an unlimited. So for me to have one of them is this unbelievable blessing and opportunity that I am so thankful for. And it's just a position that I don't take lightly. Like, this is not a hobby for me. This is my passion. And so I'm all in.
I have to say as well, as soon as we started talking about Euros and the performances, you completely lit up. You can definitely see how much passion you have for this, which is obviously amazing. And it just shows you're doing what you should be doing. No, I thought that I had to point that out because you absolutely lit up as soon as you started talking about those performances.
That's so cool.
How are you finding the communication side? Because obviously, like we said, America is huge. So I'm assuming actually, other than maybe time zone differences, is the communication with the team GBS? So I've heard that you're very big on obviously communicating and just having that bond and that relationship before you get out there. How are you finding the communication side being obviously in a completely different country?
So to be completely transparent, the only real challenge is the time difference. And so depending upon what part of daylight savings on time we're in, I think right now we're at about a 7-hour difference. So that's kind of my only challenge, really, is just being mindful of the time difference and realizing, okay, I've got to shift my communication zones, if you will, throughout the day so that I can communicate with the lifters when they're awake, when they're on time, and so forth. And but the communication side of things, aside from the time challenge, has been fantastic. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And I'm not just saying this because I'm on your podcast, and I know that this is, a British powerlifting community that largely listens to this, but this is the honest to God truth. British powerlifting has been, in terms of communication, in terms of professionalism, in terms of all of those things, and I'm speaking of my experience, has been the antithesis of what I experienced on the Powerlifting America side. So everybody has been professional, they have been transparent, they have been authentic, and they have been highly communicative. And I do, to your point, thrive on communication. That is the bedrock of any healthy relationship. And I told them that during the interview process, that I am going to be engaged with these athletes on a routine basis. Not so much that I'm bugging them or bothering them or pestering them, but they are going to know that I am invested and that I care. And I know that a lot of these lifters have only kind of known me, as I said, from a fringe or tangentially or so forth, and the other ones only know me from me competing against them at world championships. So I understand that respect is not something that's just given, and trust. Those aren't just given, they're earned. And I told them, I'm keen to earn those things from you. And I can do that best through my actions and showing you how invested I am. And so, I leverage every channel of communication that I possibly can. We've obviously got a group chat with the team on IG, but we use WhatsApp all the time. I have I had an intake form that I had the team fill out, right? Just because I'm highly organized. And so every single lifter had to complete an intake form with all their personal information, as well as the personal information of their personal coaches. Because I knew that if I couldn't reach out to an athlete and couldn't get a hold of an athlete, I can track down their coach, and their coach will find them for me. And so anyway, so yeah, so obviously, at times you have to communicate through email, just large chunk information and sending links and this and that and the other. But I leverage all of these things to my advantage when communicating, and then ultimately, once we get closer to the competition, obviously having video calls like this and an actual interface with every single athlete and their own personal coach, so that we can collaboratively install a game plan. We're not just going to arrive at the competition and say, hey, how do you feel? And we'll just, throw something together on a whim. We're going to have a game plan and a strategy in place that's obviously not so rigid that we can't adapt, but it's an outline that we have in front of us. We have a game plan, that we're going to try to follow as closely as we can. So yeah, I love communicating and meeting an athlete where they are. And so, and if I learn that one athlete prefers WhatsApp, cool. Then we're going to get down and communicate on WhatsApp most of the time. And if you want another channel, then I'll do that. So, yep.
I think that's really important. And especially like with Euros, what we've had a lot of lifters. It was their first time maybe representing Team GB. So even for the experienced lifters, having that communication and knowing that you're actually paying attention to what they're doing in training, you have a good idea of where they how their lifts move, things like that is massive. But like, I can imagine if it was me, like I coach myself anyway because I'm such a control freak. So when it comes to handlers on comp day, I'm very picky. So I can imagine, like, if I'm just putting myself in that position, like I did Commonwealth recently and Paul Marsh was my handler. Obviously I trust Paul Marsh. Like, I'm not going to not trust Paul. I have briefly worked with him once before years ago at another Commonwealth, so I knew I could trust him, but obviously he doesn't know my training. And the English team at Commonwealth is, I don't know how many lifters, but it's all the age groups, it's all the weight classes, multiple lifters in some weight class. Like, it's a lot. He's not going to know everyone's training inside and out. But I know if I'd have had that, obviously it's a smaller team for you, so obviously it's easier in that front. But just having that extra communication, I think, just instills so much more confidence in the lifter that they are in the right hands on comp day. And I think that's just so valuable, so valuable. So no, I think that's really, really important. Basically, it was what I was very long-winded way of saying that that's really important.
Yeah, and if you don't mind me adding, just because I think you'll find this kind of cool, and I'll just brag about our team a little bit. One of the things that we developed and we instituted was what we call an AMS, an athlete monitoring system. And so I'm using that to track the performance of all of our athletes. And so obviously I don't need to track all 12 weeks, but the athlete monitoring system typically starts at about 4 to 5 weeks out. And so what it means is that every single lifter on the team gets an email once per week. It goes out on a Friday evening, and they'll get that email, and it's a link to a Google form. And then they go into the Google form and they are required to tell me what their body weight was for the week. They're required to submit one video of their heaviest lifts in each discipline. I need to know the bar load. I need to know, obviously, the reps. I can count the reps, but their RPE, how the set felt to them. If they have a space to complete, if they have any niggles or if they have any things that I should be aware of, et cetera. And so what it does is it creates this one-stop shop, a place for the coaching staff to get our eyes on the training of all of our lifters so that I don't need to scour through 16 different Instagram accounts, and it's all there. And also it creates metrics on estimated 1RM and all these types of things, which is really cool on the back end. And also, not every lifter is posting all of their heaviest training on socials. So when we have this monitoring system in the last 5 weeks, it puts it all in one place and it makes our job a lot easier. And I tell them, the more that you're willing to share with us and the coaching staff, the more precise and dialed in we can be when we're putting your game plan together. So it's really cool. I mean, somebody like Ade is so highly analytical and scientific. Like when he fills out the Google form, it's like hysterical because he gives me so much information and I love it because I'm a data and stats guy and I just love that. So he's like, well, this set looked this way because, here's the context and, and so forth. So anyway, it gives an opportunity. And I've heard back to your point from a lot of the lifters and a lot of the personal coaches who are like, wow, we really appreciate the fact that you've done this because the athletes feel like you're really kind of looking after them and that you care, right? That you want to show them that this matters. Like, I also just can't take your word for it and step out on faith. If you told me, oh, I hit 300 for a triple at a 7 RPE, well, like, let's see it. I want to see it, and so forth. So anyway, it's I think that's very helpful, and it builds this trust and this collaboration.
Yeah, no, I really love that you do that, and I think that's it sounds almost like a simple idea, but no one else does it. Like, it's so important. And as an athlete as well, you're going to feel so much more confident. It's one less thing you have to stress about, because you know your game day handler, whether it's you or Susie or Peach or whoever's taking the reins from the team, they'll have that information. You don't have to worry about, like, because I know, again, for me, I am probably a bit different to a lot of people in that I like to have so much control over what I do, but like, knowing that they can see your training, so they don't have to just take your word for it, because sometimes it can be really hard to convince people how your lifts normally move and things like that, and it just takes that side away, and it builds this trust, which you're always going to perform better if you have someone that you trust in your corner.
Yeah, indeed.
I really love that.
Yeah, so that's been a very useful tool for us that we use for the team leading into Euros. And then, of course, we have squads next week, and then we'll begin the athlete monitoring system probably like second week of May leading into Worlds. Yeah.
So that is a nice segue, actually, because I was going to speak to you about Worlds, obviously coming up soon. Very, very exciting. I mean, Worlds is always exciting, but I feel like it's just every single year it just elevates and elevates. And Team GB, as you'll have seen, and I'm sure you'll agree, even though we're both probably biased here, is leveling up at such a good rate. And I'm so excited to see, obviously, how they do this year. So firstly, I want to ask you, obviously, you've got squads next, you're flying out in about a week today, I think you said, didn't you? So how are you feeling about obviously coming to squads? For anyone that doesn't maybe know, what does squads entail? Maybe give a bit of detail on that.
Yeah, so squads is Team GB's version of like one-day training camp. And so the entire team going to Euros, and of course now coming to Worlds, is will be required next week. We'll have our entire team there and our top 2 alternates. So we'll have our first alternate on the female side and our first alternate on the male side, and they are invited to come to SPD HQ. And so where a lot of things happen, they will officially receive their team kit if they haven't already received it. There will be some promotional and team photos taking place. Joe Whiteley will be there doing some interviews, but obviously the core, or the main course of our day, is the training. And so it's an opportunity for every lifter to come up and, essentially what they do, most of the people, we don't want to disrupt their normal training, but essentially what we ask of them is to do an SPD day. And that way we can get our eyes, me and Peach and the other staff members can get our hands and eyes, literally and figuratively, on the lifters. We can assess fitness and form, if they've got any niggles or injuries that we need to be aware of, and it's a good opportunity, to your point, like you said, is see how a lifter moves through a full range of motion. And because some of that is not gleaned, you can't glean that from a video. So if you see, oh, okay, well, this lifter has this particular hip that might be a little bit higher than the other one, and you kind of put that in your filing cabinet, if you will, and so you can remember that. And so it's just a good opportunity for that. It's a good opportunity for us to build camaraderie and team ethos, and an opportunity, obviously, for SPD, like I said, to kind of get everybody in the same room on a given day. And so it really is instrumental for us. It's instrumental for the team and really for the coaching staff. I took a lot away from the first one. I'm really looking forward to this next week. Because we'll have about 7 or 8 lifters on the team who weren't on the team for Euros. So it'll be a great opportunity to rub elbows with them and kind of, build that team camaraderie and that cohesion, with them. And it's something that I wish they could employ. The entire UK, if you know your geography, is about the size of Oregon in the United States. So it's like, so it's quite easier, respectfully, to do something like this in the United Kingdom, where everybody can kind of rock up on the day. In the United States, the country is so huge, it just wouldn't be logistically feasible. But anyway, I think it's awesome. I'm very much in support of it. I think it's a great thing that they do, and I'm happy to just be a part of it.
Are there any particular weight classes, obviously we won't do a preview, but for Worlds, not even necessarily just on the GB side, but are there any weight classes you're particularly looking forward to being involved in and obviously watching and coaching in?
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, the first one that would come to my mind on the female side would be the 57s, right? I mean, we've got two absolute legends in Bobby Butters and Joy Namani. And also there's just a plethora of talent on the GB side in that weight class. I mean, if you throw in Adejoke, we've got three of the best 57s in the world they're probably like in the top 6 or 7 57s in the entire world. And that's one of the things that I have found on the GB side, to your point, is that the talent is incredible. It just might be a little bit more clustered. So some of the weight classes, you may not see as much of a representation. Some of those fringe weight classes, like the really light ones and, or the really heavy ones or something like that. But that, to answer your question, that would be the first one, would be the 57s with Joy and Bobby. I think that's going to be awesome. I think also, likewise, I think the 69 kilo weight class, obviously we've got a heavy hitter in Annie Nelson, and she's just amazing. And I think what we're going to wind up seeing is a similar situation. Again, not a preview show, but such a dogfight there because there's so many people clustered into, you've presumably got, Corolla and Agatha who are a cut above the rest. But that fight for that third spot on the podium, will be amazing. And of course, it'll be cool to work with Ziana for the first time because she wasn't on the Euros team. And I know that she's just, you're 84, so you know all about her, right? She's just a phenomenal talent. So I'm really looking forward to working with her. And of course, Melina again. I mean, obviously on the men's side, you've got this 83 battle that's going to go down with Jurns and Ade, and of course Joe Borenstein, and you've got Enaharo, and so that is going to be really exciting. And honestly, the beauty of being a game day coach and specifically on a national team, a lot of people don't think about this, but imagine if you're like a football coach and you coach Manchester United, and you have one game on a pitch. Well, that's one game that you got to coach. Well, I get to go to a World Championships where I have 16 lifters, and it's almost like 16 different individual games, right? And so I get 16 opportunities, or we, the coaching staff, get that many opportunities to coach that many different games, if you will, within a week's time. And that's one of the things that I think also makes it just so special. So I think, to your point, I told the team this at the squads heading into Euros. I said, we've heard the expression and the cliche that a high tide raises all boats. And I told Team GB, I said, you're the high tide. You are the high tide, and you need to start believing that. You are raising this thing up, and you're a huge part of that. So you need to act like it, and you need to believe that. And I think it's exciting to see. So I think we're in for some amazing battles in a lot of different weight classes. And so,
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think with GB as well, I don't know if you'll know this, but when Henry Tosh was head coach, he brought in A and B totals, which was the selection criteria for making Team GB. And I remember when they first came out, I think everyone was a little bit like, oh my God, like those A totals, maybe 3 or 4 lifters across men and women are going to hit them, like very, very difficult to hit. Because I think they would have placed you roughly third on average at the last few World Championships was kind of how they were done. I could be getting that slightly wrong, but that was the idea. And then the B total was the next bit to aim for, a little bit lower kind of thing, maybe like top 5, 6. And I remember at the time, everyone thought that these were so unrealistic, apart from for those few bigger names already at that level. Yeah. And then literally at first nationals after they were introduced, maybe the A totals weren't hit super comfortably by that many people, but people were close. And the B totals were smashed by so many people. And then the following year, I think he put them up a little bit more. And the same thing happened again. And it was just like, because you've been given this level to hit, people are finding a way to do it. And I think since that, this momentum within GB has just been growing. And obviously, like, one thing that comes to mind from last year as well was obviously Jurins beating Russ and
of course
proving how strong he was, which obviously everyone in GB knew he was strong, but coming in and winning, and it was like, he proved that he can do it. And it's like, well, if Jurins can do it, why can't other people? And then again, everyone's leveling up, and you've got like Ade in the 83s as well, who's always been around, but then he's leveled up. And I think obviously it's that thing of the more you see this talent in your country, the more you think, well, if they can do it, I can do it. I think seeing like the Americans, for example, who have always been near that top end, right? They've always been really strong and ahead. It almost feels a bit unrealistic to think you could be like them, because I think a lot of people for years have been like, on the men's side, I guess in particular, they've all played football, in like American football in high school, and they've been in the weight room since they were like 13 years old, which we don't do so much in this country. And I think that was the excuse a lot of GB lifters hid behind. But now it's been proven that that's not the excuse. You can't hide behind that. If you just continue to work, obviously you can get there. And I think that's where this leveling up is coming from. And obviously across all the weight classes since Sheffield came in as well, people breaking records year on year. It shouldn't be normal to break a record every year, right? But people are proving it's possible. And yet every country is leveling up. And obviously the sport is just growing at such a rapid rate. We're going to get more talented people coming in. GB in particular is very, very exciting to be a British lifter at the moment. Oh,
and like I said, there's only a finite number of jobs available. And the fact that I was able to get on with GB, which is one of the most talented rosters and talented nations in the world, is just amazing. And so I'm so blessed and so thankful. And it's just, I can't come over here and wave a magic wand and guarantee a specific color medal for each person or a team championship. But what I can guarantee is my attitude, my consistency, my effort, my preparation, my investment in the team, and that I'm going to give my very best. And in return, in kind, we anticipate the very best out of Team GB. And you have to believe that you're that good. And to your point, everybody's been leveling up, and it's so exciting to see.
Definitely. I haven't got too many more questions for you.
Okay.
I did want to speak to you briefly about the World Games. Obviously, there's not tons that we can really talk through just because obviously we're not that close to it yet. There's still time to go. I actually don't think all the nominations have gone out yet either, have they? I think there's still some invites to go the second round.
That's my understanding. Yeah. So whatever you've seen is not necessarily the final iteration. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So have you been to a World Games before? Obviously, you've coached many times in the past. Have you coached at a World Games before?
I have. I was the head coach of the men's team in 2009, which was in Kaohsiung, Taiwan. So, I was fortunate enough to coach there, and ultimately Mike Tuchscherer was the very first American male with USA Powerlifting to win the gold medal. So that was exciting, and of course that was equipped. But so now this will be my second time at a World Games, and so and back on that side of the world will be exciting as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's going to be really interesting to see. I'll be honest, I hadn't heard of the World Games. I think I knew of it because Tony Cliff, did he get a medal at the last World Games in equipped?
I think he may have. That was the last one in America. That was in Birmingham, Alabama, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's the only time I'd heard of World Games.
Okay, yeah. So it's, for your listeners, it's every 4 years on the odd year after an Olympic year, and it is essentially the Olympics for the non-Olympic sports. That's probably the easiest way to describe it. And so that's kind of where powerlifting falls in. And until at this point, it's been all equipped. And so this will be the very first year that classic powerlifting, raw powerlifting, has been unveiled at the World Games. So that in and of itself is exciting, and that in and of itself should aggregate more eyeballs on the sport.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. I'm so excited to see it and watch it. And I think it's just going to be interesting to see how it all goes, I guess, because it is a bit of an unknown on the classic side. So I'm very excited for that. Is there anything else you've got coming up that you're looking forward to? I think we've probably covered most things from this calendar, but
that's pretty much it. It's squads next week, right? And then and then after, at least on the GB side, it's Worlds obviously in Germany, followed by World Games. In between there, I'll be going to our Powerlifting America age division nationals, which will be all of our masters, our sub juniors, and our juniors, as well as our equipped. They kind of lump that in, and that's at the end of May. So actually, I'll be coaching a lot of people at that competition. Probably have at least a dozen, maybe even 15 lifters spread out across the week there. And then right after that, I'll be heading to Germany. So those are kind of the four big things that are left on the calendar. Yeah. So
I also realized I forgot to ask you if there were any particular highlights from Powerlifting American Nationals just gone. Obviously, you were there handling. There were some amazing performances put up anyway, but I just wonder if there are any particular highlights that you can think of.
Yeah, just right off the jump, on the women's side, I think it's a highlight that Heather Kiner kind of came in and reestablished herself, you know what I mean? And I know that Jess didn't wind up competing, but Heather, to her credit, put 15 kilos on her PB total, which is extraordinary, which is really cool. It was nice to see Natalie Richards back in a singlet again. It had been a while. And so not yet in top form, but presumably if she can get healthy and bring that package to Worlds, then she'll be clashing with Joy and Bobby. So, we'll see. Obviously, the battle of the 69s was, let's not forget about what Meg Scanlon did. I mean, she just put 11 kilos on the world record unofficially. Like, how do you do that? Like, she's just brilliant. She's amazing. I love Meg. She's such a phenomenal person and just an outstanding lifter. And so that was exciting to see. The battle of the 69s was really cool. Just those three women kind of duking it out. And then obviously Celine Crum emerging, and I know that she'll be formidable at Worlds. And then of course on the men's side, I mean, obviously it goes to the 83s and the 93s, right? Those were kind of the two biggest classes there in terms of aggregating viewership and eyeballs and live stream views. And so that was really, really exciting. And also we had a bit of an upset in the men's 66 class. We had a guy, in Avery Jackson, who literally nobody knew about, just came and was able to win on the final pull and punch his ticket to go to Germany. So there'll be a lot of different, to your point, a lot of, there'll be some return faces, on this team, but there'll be a lot of new faces on the American team this year. And so that's got to be exciting for Team USA as well. And exciting for the powerlifting community just to have some new people kind of sprinkled in. So, yeah.
I like that you briefly mentioned Avery Jackson there, because I haven't finished it yet, but I was listening to some of the podcasts that he did with King of the Lifts, after, and it was the way he was like, yeah, I didn't my followers doubled overnight. I don't really like that. This is not the right time for you to be winning that, is it?
Yeah, exactly. I know. Yeah. Yeah, he was for sure on our side an unknown quantity. He'd competed in some other feds, the USPA and the 2-hour weigh-in and the deadlift bar, but and albeit the drug tested version of those. But now he came over to this one and had to do it all, with the 2-hour weigh-in and so forth. And credit to him. I mean, he went 9 for 9, executed like a pro, and got on the team. So that was exciting.
Really exciting. It's always exciting as well just to see different names on the list for Worlds. Obviously, we've still got a lot of the heavy hitters. But same with Euros as well. I did a brief Euros preview, and granted, it wasn't the most thorough preview we've ever done. But me and Millie were talking about it as we were filming it. There's so many different names. A lot of the top lifters, I think, chose not, or the more commonly known top lifters chose not to do it just because of the schedule, which is obviously completely fair. But the competition was still so high, and there was just so many different names that then got that opportunity.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, to your point, is that even though some of the quote unquote usual suspects weren't there, it's an opportunity for maybe these B tier lifters or the second tier lifters in these other countries and federations. It gives them their first, taste of this international competition experience. And that's what helps coaches, athletes, teams, natures all level up. And so it's a big deal. It's important for the growth of the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a good time to wrap it up. My final thing I was going to ask you, since you have worked with so many different lifters of, I'm guessing different levels anyway, but obviously you've worked with a lot of high level lifters at this point. I wonder if there's any kind of common traits that you see in those higher level lifters.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I know I asked you for some of these questions in advance. And so it was good because I wrote some things down for this one. That's a great question. I mean, I think my knee-jerk reaction is we have the obvious ones that a lot of these higher level athletes in the sport all have, right? They've got the genetics, which is the leverages and the muscle mass, and technique too. You rarely see a really high level lifter with horrible technique, right? So those are kind of the, if we're painting with a broad brush, those are the things that we see that are common amongst all of those people. I've often said, in my view, that an athlete's greatest ability is availability. And what I mean by that is health. And so, right, and so their second greatest ability, if you say that their number one ability is availability, which is health, then durability or maintaining health over time is really a key component, because to stay at a high level, it's not to say that you're not going to get injured, you're not going to have aches and pains. Competing at this level, pushing the envelope, you're going to get dinged occasionally, but it's the ones who can manage that over time that allow them to stay relevant and stay in the game. I think those are some common traits. And then just I'll add some of the less obvious ones. I think really have to go with having a champion mindset. And I actually talked about this quite a bit in my book and devoted a significant amount of time to it. And it's just these high-level lifters having the ability to compartmentalize things in their brain, put things in a proper place, in a proper perspective. They're very, very decisive. So it's almost like even when their options are bad or their choices are bad, it's recognizing, hey, I always have a choice, and making that choice efficiently and expeditiously. And then the last two things, as far as the champion mindset go, is being mentally strong, like embracing adversity and not being afraid of adversity. It's not running from that, but almost running to it, as if to say, okay, that's cool. You've stacked this chip against me. I'll show you, type of thing. And then and then the last thing is just this aura of positivity. And I know that it's easy for us to say, oh, don't worry, be happy type of thing. But I'm talking about somebody who can genuinely look at a situation and view it as glass half full, even, you know what I mean? And say, hey, there's a silver lining here, and I'm intentionally choosing to focus on the glass being half full as opposed to half empty, when it would be so easy to kind of boo-hoo about a situation. And so I know that's a long way of kind of answering your question, but I think that your attitude and your mindset is the thing that ultimately, once we get past the genetics, which everybody's going to possess and all these things, the work ethic and the consistency, what truly separates the excellent from the great, the all-time greats, is that champion mindset and that ability to just become a force of nature by virtue of their attitude.
I really like the glass half full part that you answered with, because actually, even just with my own lifters, like my lifters are more of like a local level. There's a few that are now at that national level, but you can see even just within them, the ones that make the most progress are the ones that, even if they have like a bad session, they're like, oh well, it'll be better next week. Like they approach like that rather than being like, oh well, I've messed the whole block up now, I've overshot. Like just seeing it in that slightly more positive mindset, which is obviously like, it can be hard to learn that as a skill, but I do think it's still a skill that people develop. Some people that maybe have a sports background will probably have that a bit more easily anyway, because it's kind of the environment they've grown up in, and it's just how they've looked at things, or just people with a more positive mindset in general. But no, I think that's a really good answer. I really like that. I also am glad I prepped you for that one, because it was like one of the first episodes I did was with Owen Leggett, and I asked him the same question right near the end, and he was like, I maybe could have prepped for this one, because it is quite a broad question, but I think his answer was a short-term memory. And it's that thing at which I think does kind of link into what you were going with the positive mindset kind of thing, in that if something doesn't go your way, like on game day, I think his example was someone missed a couple squats on depth, but they didn't let it impact the rest of the session, because it was like, okay, well, that's done now. I'll forget that happened. I'll just move on. And I think just having that positive attitude, although it is different, obviously the glass half full thing, it links in that you just have to have that positive attitude and approach to things.
Exactly. Yeah. It's maybe even in the moment, having just pausing for a brief moment to kind of reflect and assess and say, okay, to your point, I'm over it. That's in my rear view mirror. Now I have, if it's the squat, I have 2 more disciplines, and I have 6 more opportunities to score kilos and make something out of this day, because you can't change what just happened. So yeah, absolutely. No, I really love that answer. And I don't know if you've got anything you want to shout out. Obviously, for your book, I think we should shout out your book anyway, because I think it is. I mean, I haven't actually read it, I will confess. I'm not very good at reading, but I can read. I don't enjoy reading. But I think we shout out your book. I don't know if you want to shout out your socials or anything you've got coming up, other than obviously the GB head coach. Yeah, I mean, you can find me obviously on Instagram. That's an easy place. It's just MLGary72. There's a link there in my link tree to my game day coaching manual. Even to your point, if you don't like to read a lot, I did include quite a bit of visuals and graphics, a lot of photos, a lot of charts. So I'm not going to lie, it's text heavy, because it's, that's how you communicate the information, but it's also data and chart and graphic heavy as well. So anyway, plug for the book. And then, of course, I've got my website as well, which is just supremesportspt.com, and you can find pretty much everything about me on that as well.
Yeah, perfect. I want to just thank you for joining me. It's been really great chatting to you, and I'm really grateful you came on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been delightful, and I'm honored to be a guest. Thank you for the opportunity.